Hi, I'm Joe, and I am the creator of Thistle Coaching. I wanted to share a little bit about myself today and a little bit about what Thistle Coaching is. The first thing I would like to start with is to tell you a little bit about how I got to where I am right now. And my journey with my own mental health has been an interesting one. I originally ended up in my first therapy session when I was around 14 after my brother had committed suicide. And shortly after that, my mom and stepdad, who was really the parents I knew at that time, got divorced. And it really felt like my world had turned upside down. Being that my mom really didn't know what else to do with me, she told me I needed to go to a therapist. But back in the day, we didn't talk about mental health. In my family, we didn't even talk about feelings. So I ended up in front of this person and had nothing to say. Flash forward to me being a young adult and ending up in an abusive relationship. And at the same time, my dad also committed suicide. And I ended up back on the therapist's couch and still didn't have any new tools or any new way of explaining what I was feeling because those tools just had not been shared with me as I was growing up. As I continued on my journey, I started to gather my diagnoses from anxiety to chronic depression, PTSD, and then the medications kicked in. I was given antidepressants that was supposed to help me to come up. I was given anti-anxiety meds that was supposed to help me to come down, and pretty much everything in between for a 20-year relationship with prescription medications. During some of those years, I also ended up with some health issues, like a herniated disc and ruptured discs. So they added to my mental health medications, they added pain pills and additional cocktails for me to try to balance things out. As many of you know, because we are talking more about mental health these days, this roller coaster ride is confusing and overwhelming. And most often, people who haven't experienced that roller coaster personally, they know someone who has, and they have no idea how to communicate with us. So that brings me to how I started thinking about Thistle Coaching. I originally was going to go into marriage and family counseling when I went back to school at 45 years old. I had lost 2 jobs to being laid off in a 12-month period of time, and I ended up in an unemployment class where they were supposed to try to help me re-educate myself and get me a job. Well, having had multiple careers in the first 25 years of my adult life, I really wasn't sure what they'd be able to offer me, and what I ended up with was the most unexpected gift and treat that I could have ever dreamed of. My teacher in my unemployment class ended up noticing that I was kind of always there for everyone and that I had become a really great listener and had some really good insight for my fellow, my peer students. And she suggested that I go back to college full time. And that started my education in psychology. As I continued on in school, I also ended up doing an internship at a mental hospital. And that began my interest, my confusion, and my anger towards the mental health community and how people were being treated. I couldn't understand how someone who just the day before probably had been out in society and really hadn't been noticed, and then one day there's a mental health crisis and they end up in a hospital and they're treated oftentimes like they're not even human. It was a really sad and dark time for me to realize what was happening behind the walls of the mental hospital. Now, still being new in my education, I had no idea what I was going to do to try to serve this community of people, especially considering that I was one of them. I just hadn't ended up in the hospital at that point. But I knew I wanted to do something.